Good morning, students, and welcome back to yet another class of English literature. In today's video, we are going to continue with the prose Chief Seattle's speech. In our previous two videos, we learned about Chief Seattle, the theme on which this piece of prose is based, that is, the Red Indians' attachment to their land, oppression, the clash of civilization which existed between the whites and the Red Indians, the environmental concerns that Seattle has put forward through his speech. We also learned about the arguments regarding the Native Indians' land rights that Seattle has put forward through his speech. We learned about the great chief, that is George Washington, and the white chief refers to the governor Isaac Stevens. In today's video, we are going to deal with the important lines from the lessons. Your God seems to us to be partial. He came to the white man. We never saw him, never even heard his voice. He gave the white man laws, but had no word for his red children, whose teeming millions fill this vast continent as the stars fill the firmament. Firmament refers to the night sky. So here in these lines, Seattle speaks of his awareness towards the Christianity, but also do not mark a complete, unquestioned acceptance of the religion. It is rather defeated by a simple internal logic which affirms the partiality of the white man's God. The fact that their God gave them laws written on tablets of stone by the iron finger. This refers to the 10 Commandments. And this highlights the technology of the written word which wasn't available to the ancestors of the Native Americans. One can thus see how our belief systems are informed by the technology we command, and how unjustified and unethical is the sheer action of discouraging somebody else's faith without understanding how it is formed and the role it plays in our lives. It is important that we respect each other's way of life and refrain from a homogenizing attempt is made clear by the chief's words. In this regard, the words, "Your God is not our God. Your God loves your people and hates mine," is a strong statement made by Seattle which unmasks the excluding tendency of monotheistic religions that claim authority over absolute truth. Moving on, the next important line, "And the very dust in which you stand responds more lovingly to their footsteps than yours, because it is rich with the blood of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of their sympathetic touch." The explanation of these lines. This deep association with one's land as a physical space gains its strength not only by the virtue of being one's place of birth, but also because the land has been a part of their existence, the very core of their being, and it cannot be obliterated by political events, however great. The European settlers carried out brutal massacres to wipe out the teeming millions, and this brutality is the reason why the chief's people have been greatly outnumbered. A cycle of violence on both sides had created a sense of mistrust between the two communities, and this time the government was coming after their lands. However, Seattle's positive response speaks volumes of his attempt to ease the tension between the two races. Chief Seattle ends his speech on a very somber note as he foreshadows the time when the memory of his tribe shall have become myth among the white men. It is interesting to know that during the rapid growth of scholarship and research in Chief Seattle's speech in the later half of the 20th century, many even came to the conclusion that the oration of Chief Seattle never took place and the speech is nothing more than fiction. Chief Seattle makes a final demand to allow the people of the tribe to visit in any time or place the graves of their ancestors. It is very important to understand the nature of this demand, as it sheds great light on the value systems of the Native American society. This demand by the chief helps us understand what his people value the most. As it turns out, the one condition Seattle places forth is that his people be allowed the privilege of visiting at any point of time the tombs of their ancestors, friends, and children. In short, what Seattle demands for and what his people consider to be most precious is their distinct way of living and their culture. Next, at night, when the streets of your cities and villages are silent and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled them and still loved the beautiful land. Chief Seattle's treaty oration of 1854 is a remarkable speech which presents us a perspective that has for long been placed by a Western idea of civilization. It is an eloquent expression of the untold sufferings inflicted on the natives of places all around the world who had the misfortune of being on the European colonizers' path towards global dominion. The chief, however, does not present the case of his tribe with bitterness, but rather seems to embrace its gradual demise with a stoic resignation. This piece also gives us a view of the ethos and culture on which Seattle's tribe had been built on. And it is in every way as important and dear as the ideas of a virgin civilization propagated by the white man. The speech is one which calls for tolerance, accommodation, and mutual respect of different ways of living. The oration of Chief Seattle is a gift of an age gone by. It is the voice of the past directing the actions of the present and is bound to impact the future. Our world needs to hold on to this gem like never before. With growing threats of communal violence both in the home and the world, Chief Seattle's speech with its themes of tolerance, accommodation, reconciliation, and respect for each other's differences is all we have to latch onto. In this regard, the oration of Chief Seattle is like the guiding spirit of the Red Indian folklore, which is speaking to the present world towards tolerance and cooperation. Would that we tune our ears to heed its message? Chief Seattle's character. Chief Seattle, we already have read this before, it's just a recap for you all. Chief Seattle was a Native American chief, a member of the Squamish tribe, and a prominent figure among his people, who pursued a path of accommodation and reconciliation with the white settlers. The chief is well known for his famous speech of 1854, a plea for respect of Native American land rights and environmental values. And this speech sheds some light on the traits of the speaker's character. Chief Seattle's knowledge and wisdom is reflected throughout his speech. The way he draws comparisons from nature and the way he talks about the common destiny of death only reflects his wisdom. Seattle's friendly and accommodating nature is evident when he says, "We may be brothers after all. We will see." We can see his credibility when the man asserts that my words are like stars that never change. Seattle is also self-critical when he disapproves of the impulsive behavior of his own young people. Overall, Seattle is a man with great understanding and leadership qualities. He is also respectful not only to his ancestors and their words, but also to the white settlers. Now, who are the Haidas and the Tsimshians? Haida are North American indigenous people who have traditionally occupied the coastal bays and inlets of Haida Gwaii, that is the island of the people in British Columbia. Tsimshians are North American Indians of the northwest coast who traditionally lived on the mainland and islands around the Skeena and Nass rivers in British Columbia, Canada, and Alaska. Chief Seattle mentions these two tribes as the Red Indians' ancient enemies far to the northward, who understandably used to frighten their women, children, and old people. Thank you, children. Please read the text thoroughly and answer the questions given in your assignments. You need to note down the questions in your treasure trove notebook in the prose part and not in the poetry part. Have a wonderful day ahead, children.